Hi, everyone. We'll give a few more minutes for people to join. Okay, I think we'll get started. Hello and welcome to the second of Policy and Program Learning's webinar series, Research Unbound. Thank you for being with us. Joining us today are two researchers who over the last year completed a very interesting project on Syrian-run small to medium enterprises in Turkey. Dogan Çelik, the Director of Innovation for Development, and Nazli Kazanoglu, postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Gender Studies. I'm looking forward to their presentation and overview of the research findings. At CIPE, we have been working with refugee entrepreneurs for quite some time. The Livelihoods Innovation through Food Entrepreneurship, or LIFE project, is one such project encouraging entrepreneurship and job creation among refugees in Turkey. We learned how entrepreneurs could build and grow businesses and create livelihoods. We're excited that Dogan and Nazli's report, The Current Status of Syrian-led SMEs in Turkey, can add to this body of knowledge, and we can't wait to see where it leads CIPE. Since the war began in Syria in 2011, more than 11 million Syrians have been displaced. Roughly 3.6 million Syrian refugees now live in Turkey. Though the amount of refugees has strained resources and local communities and introduced tensions and pressures in Turkey, Syrian refugees have demonstrated considerable entrepreneurial resolve, creating thousands of small businesses across Turkey. While grappling with war and so much loss, Syrian refugee entrepreneurship in Turkey is a remarkable story. So we were very excited about Dogan and Nazli's research over the last year. In this webinar, they will present their report findings on opportunities for and challenges of refugee-led small to medium enterprises, driving economic growth in Turkey and transforming the lives of refugees. After the presentation, we'll have some time for a Q&A, so please be sure to use the question and answer function in the chat. So without further ado, I'll leave it up to Dogan and Nazli.
Thank you, Adam. Hi, everybody. My name is Nazli, and today Dogan and I will share our research with you. But before that, I will share my screen and so we can start. Okay. So yes, today Dogan and I will share our research, which we have conducted in November, December 2021. So now I will very briefly discuss about the current status of Syrian SMEs in Turkey, our research aims and the ways in which we have conducted our research. Then Dogan will mention about our findings and our recommendations. So as we all know, the Syrian war, which started in 2011, has led to robust political and economic changes, not only in Syria, but also in the neighboring countries. Turkey now, being one of the countries which is hosting the highest numbers of Syrians, are hosting more than 3.6 million Syrian refugees. During the first years of their arrival, these refugees were under the status of guests, and their basic needs were met by the Turkish government and notable national and international aid organizations, humanitarian aid organizations. But now, in the 10th year of their arrival, they have reached to the capacity so that they can be very active in Turkish labor market. According to latest statistics, which have been published by TÜİK, the Turkish Statistical Institute, now there is more than 1.3 million Syrian refugees actively working in Turkish labor market. Although majority of them are working as a cheap labor in low-wage sectors, there are also high numbers of Syrian refugees who have started their own businesses. So as you can see from this figure here, as you can see from this figure here, the number of the refugees who have started their businesses have reached around 10,000. And when we look at their sectorial division, we can see most of them are working in wholesale, retail, and vehicle repair sectors, which is then followed by manufacturing and then the accommodation and food service. But it is argued that these refugees have been contributing to Turkey's inclusive economic growth in a very good senses. There are many reasons behind this contribution. First of it is their ability to speak multiple languages and their international networks. With their international networks and ability to speak multiple languages, they have contributed to Turkey's export activities. According to the, again, latest statistics published by TÜİK, the Turkey's export activities from Turkey to MENA region has increased 20% over the last 7 years. In addition to this, they have created new jobs and they have provided new livelihoods. And again, due to their international cultures, their different cultures, they have provided new services and new products to Turkish culture, to Turkish labor market. But on the other hand, when we look at from the other side, they have been facing various difficulties which have not been faced by local SMEs. The language comes first of it. And then in addition to language, the cultural differences, because there's a huge difference between the Turkish alphabet, the Latin alphabet, and the Arabic alphabet, the Syrian SMEs, they have been limited in terms of their activities. On the other hand, because they are not familiar with the Turkish labor market culture, they still face some difficulties in working with the Turkish firms, Turkish companies. So this cultural differences still is a big barrier in front of Syrian SMEs. In order to overcome all these remedies and to help Syrian SMEs to reach their potential, the national and international NGOs, national and international CBOs, Turkish government, local municipalities, the chambers of commerce, and notable donor organizations, UN agencies, they have been doing their best. They have been providing both financial and non-financial intervention tools. When we look at the non-financial intervention tools, we can mention about numerous training and mentoring sessions on different topics, matchmaking and twinning opportunities, and networking events. But although these organizations doing their best, there are some unanticipated and undesirable situations occur in the field. But within this framework, in order to overcome these unanticipated and undesirable situations occurring in the field, and also help Syrian SMEs to contribute Turkey's inclusive economic growth, we have conducted this research. And with our recommendations, we would like all these remedies and all these unanticipated situations will be cancelled and removed. So our biggest aim was to analyze the ways in which Syrian SMEs operating in Turkey is contributing to the inclusive economic growth in Turkey. But other than that, we tried to understand the effectiveness of all these non-financial intervention tools in empowering Syrian SMEs. In so doing, we have adopted a qualitative approach and we have used qualitative research design. So we have collected our data from different key actors. So our interview partners were obviously the Syrian SMEs who were facilitated from these non-financial intervention tools, and some notable donor organizations such as EU, EBRD, and UN agencies like UNDP, UNHRC, UNHCR, but also the implementing organizations. We have listened their experiences, their lived experiences in the field. These were such as INGEV or I4D. And then the collected data, we have analyzed our data with the thematic analysis. So now here, I'll leave Dogan to mention about our findings and our recommendations, and I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards.
Thank you, Nazli. We try to categorize under 6 main categories as for the reasons for undesirable situations. It's obvious to say that just after we conducted this analysis in Turkey with more than 10 different actors, first biggest barrier was the language barrier in Turkey, because according to the implementing partners and organizations' observation from the field, these Syrian entrepreneurs have been facing this language barrier, and this language barrier deprives them of great mentoring and coaching opportunities. And in addition to that, Syrian entrepreneurs who are not able to speak Turkish or English fall behind those who can benefit from those mentoring and coaching sessions, even if they operate with an interpreter, because in many cases, in many instances, those modules are being provided in Turkish or English, but not in Arabic. As for the second major problem, Syrian-led SMEs' financial problems also deter them from taking the maximum advantage of these mentoring and coaching sessions, because of the fact that, according to, again, implementing organizations such as mentioned by Dr. Nazli, as mentioned by implementing partners such as Human Development Foundation or the development practitioners working for IPE or UN agencies, in many cases, especially for micro-scale SMEs who are most likely to face financial problems, cannot benefit from those coaching and mentoring sessions, as do not have financial capacity to follow the recommendations made by the coaches and or mentors as a result of project implementation for the benefit of those people who are at risk and in need. And a third major problem was that we have identified throughout the research was that the Turkish private sector's pretty much skeptical about the role of international donor community and the relation with the Syrian SMEs. Due to the exaggeration and misinformation about the financial support provided by the international donor community aiming at increasing Syrian enterprises' capacity, actually there was a misperception. I just want to share with you one of those interviews comments on the reality, especially the representative, the person who took part in this research was from UNDP in Turkey. She said that the Turkish private sector does not take kindly to supporting Syrian SMEs. I got such an impression from the field, they are rebels after all. So this is the pure indicator about how they are being approached by the local private sector actors in Turkey. Even though this paradigm has been gradually changing, as Turkish entrepreneurs have come to acknowledge the export potential of Syrian SMEs in Turkey in the midst of this economic turmoil, some Turkish entrepreneurs still see Syrian entrepreneurs as opponents and concerned about the competition that Syrian entrepreneurs would pose, which is pretty much visible in the local Turkish entrepreneurship environment. And the fourth one, please, next slide, Nazli. The fourth one was actually the struggling to engage with Turkish SMEs. Again, in many cases, Syrian SMEs are heavily concentrated in the areas where the majority of population is dominated by Arabic-speaking people. So doing business with Syrians is a kind of a quote-unquote business as usual with the same group members, which also do not allow them to get into the local business environment in order to keep sustaining their own businesses for the sake of business to social cohesion. There was also another, let's say, emphasis is shared by one of those participants, actually from European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. He said that, I just want to quote his quotation here. He said that relying on what we have been seeing from both chambers of commerce and consultancy as well as access to finance, the bank's general observation is that when Turkish businesses enter the Turkish business ecosystem, they create their own roadmap, and the same goes for Syrian SMEs too. This is interesting, by the way, this part. They revolve in their own internal network, and I think that their access to the external network is limited. There's a difference in the way they do businesses. That's crucial, I guess. Today, despite the increased efforts of donor and implementing partners to encourage actually Turkish and the Syrian entrepreneurs to work together in order to contribute to the inclusive economic environment in the midst of this catastrophe, Syrian entrepreneurs are actually still struggling to engage with Turkish entrepreneurs. That's the reality in Turkey. Some Syrian entrepreneurs who do not engage with Turkish entrepreneurs try to operate in sectors actually in which Turkish entrepreneurs mostly and also highly are concentrated in, which eventually also creates a kind of a severe competition. So this is the kind of a place where the competition is pretty much alive, given that Turkey is one of the biggest economy in this ranking in general. So this competition also among Turkish and Syrian counterparts is very, very, very likely to pose a threat to Syrian refugees' social cohesion and also the social integration as well as the inclusive economic growth in Turkey. So for the rest of two main undesirable situations, I just want to handle both of them altogether. Actually, one is about the conducting need and impact assessment, and another one is the lack of coordination efforts amongst organizations and donors. There are the most frequently seen the problems mentioned by various actors, mostly by donor organizations, by the way, rather than the implementing partners, which is quite interesting. The first major problem actually faced by many implementing organizations is the risk of duplication, because there's a large number of institutions in Turkey providing some training modules, mentoring supports, matchmaking activities for not only Syrians but at the same time for Turkish community members. They have been experiencing the same thing. According to, again, this implementing partners' field experience, they say there's a lack of coordination and interaction between these institutions delivering the training sessions, which results in replicated training programs. This is frequently, again, emphasized by those actors, saying that delivering the same training to the same SME over and over again eventually loses its effectiveness and instead causes time and enthusiasm loss. So this is one of the pure examples that I can share with you. I have observed that the same SME has received the same amount of money for about approximately speaking 6 times from six different competition SME the projects being initiated by different actors. I'm seeing your hand, Kim. I assume that's wrong. If you don't mind, I can keep talking. Yeah. So and secondly, the lack of communication and coordination amongst donor organizations and implementing partners create a kind of misinterpretation when it comes to executing and implementing the new projects. And in many cases, again, we have seen that all those efforts are heavily concentrated in some of the most refugee intense areas. But in fact, the reality is that this creates kind of a gap amongst Syrian SMEs in terms of their development level, because of the fact that we haven't seen the same project implementation in the same areas, which is a kind of create an uncertainty in terms of the allocating sufficient level of money and time to to the most needed areas rather than replicating the same thing in the same region or in the same province. So the third, the ways in which funds are provided cause some problems for implementing partners in the field, actually, as a result of this circumstance happening. Although there are some various projects funds available for projects involving refugee entrepreneurship, duration of these projects is very scarce, and given that in many instances those development projects are almost taking, approximately speaking, for 2 years, this creates kind of time pressure on project implementators, and which also create a kind of the failure for the implementing partners in order to reach out to the targets, which also affects the efficiency and effectiveness of the project implementation. So this short-term projects cause 3 actually major problems to donors, but specifically to implementing organizations in the field. To give an example, to name the first one, the scarcity of this time creates pressure on implementing organizations, as said, in terms of delivery of support. And under these stressful conditions, in order to design this intervention process in no time, actually, implementing organizations overlook the need assessment process, which is also interesting. One of those participants who took part in this research said that we were not able to make this need assessment prior to designing this project, which was quite weird at that time. So we tried to also mention this part in this research as well. And designing this intervention actually without and this in-depth need assessment restrained the implementing organization from reaching the right beneficiary at the right time and place with an effect-oriented approach through the right method. That's pretty much crucial, actually, which sometimes leads to waste of time and enthusiasm amongst those refugee entrepreneurs. And secondly, those short-term projects also obstruct donors and implementing organizations to measure the impact of intervention. Implementing and donor organizations who cannot measure the long-term impact of the interventions designed also fail to tailor the intervention and perhaps actually repeat the same activities in the same region. This is also frequently seen issue in the field. Repetitive activities conducted in the same region through different actors. So actually, all those things mentioned here are the results of having no well-constructed, well-designed coordination mechanisms in place by, again, donor organizations. Moving forward to the next slide from this point, we just want to quickly share with you the recommendations. Actually, in order to overcome these remedies and help Syrian-led SMEs to realize their potential and contribution to the Turkish inclusive economic growth, we try to come up with 10 recommendations for the intermediate organizations and also for the donor community. First thing, as mentioned, was overcoming language barriers. So Syrian entrepreneurs' inability to speak this Turkish does not only cloud their business making, but also deprive them benefiting from the non-financial support provided to them. So that should be kind of a holistic approach in melting all non-financial and financial instruments by melting them, in the same pot. We try to come up with tailor-made, comprehensive technical and financial packages all together in a holistic manner. And under these circumstances, intermediate organizations can overcome this language problem through actually predefined 4 different ways, as mentioned in the report. First, they should design their non-financial intervention, be it training or be it mentoring or be it coaching in Arabic. And second, they should support Syrian entrepreneurs by translating Turkish laws into Arabic, because that's also the reality that we have observed in the field, that there was not any written sources in Arabic for those who are at the beginning of their own entrepreneurial journey in the host community. So, which is also needed in this specific context. Third one is that they should prepare guides to support Syrian entrepreneurs through their own entrepreneurial paths in Arabic, as mentioned. Finally, there is a need in the field of providing some business Turkish language skills for them, which would be also slightly longer than the training programs they have organized so far by the implementing partners operating in Turkey. But in the end, these Turkish trainings would be the most permanent and sustainable solution to Syrian entrepreneurs' language problems. Kind of a preventive measures that we can keep investing in order to overcome this language barrier in Turkey. Second one is combine financial interventions with non-financial interventions. Providing this non-financial but technical support towards Syrian entrepreneurs would allow them to be more sustainable in the business world, because at the end, the problems are the same problems as Turkish business organizations have been facing, especially again in the midst of this economic uncertainty. But on the other hand, this Syrian entrepreneurs, one of the major problems is, in addition to all those same problems that have been also faced by Turkish counterparts, is lack of sufficient financial resources, which would also deprive them from applying what they have learned in training programs in their daily working lives. So combination of both would be make them ready for the final move and in daily businesses. So therefore, combining in short, combining these two intervention techniques and providing them together is of vital importance. And the third one is define the need and design the intervention. Although the Syrian entrepreneurs experience common problems and feature similar disadvantages, there are also significant differences in terms of their problems and disadvantages, mostly stemming from their size, location, and level of development maturity level. Therefore, beyond designing the content and intervention model, intermediate organizations should work with local partners from the field and design the intervention according to the needs of target SME group. Again, this is an observation from the field. Those organizations are mostly from the international humanitarian aid sphere, and they have pretty much limited understanding towards the needs of the local community members as well as the SMEs led by Syrians. So that's why a combination of local partners together with the international counterparts would be would be more useful in terms of providing the sufficient level of the capacity building activities for those who are trying to survive again in the midst of this economic turmoil among Syrian-led SMEs. The next one will be the prioritized Syrian-led SMEs export potential. This is quite interesting again, because at the end, intermediate organizations should better acknowledge Syrian entrepreneurs' potential for increased export activities and support them in this regard. Also, intermediate organizations again should provide information to Syrian entrepreneurs about their living, working permits and visas. And furthermore, they should also encourage Syrian entrepreneurs' export-oriented activities by translating export laws, regulations into Arabic or something, or providing them Arabic-speaking mentors. Again, and finally, intermediate organizations should facilitate partnerships between Turkish and Syrian entrepreneurs, in which Turkish entrepreneurs could benefit from Syrian entrepreneurs' foreign network, while Syrian entrepreneurs could benefit from Turkish entrepreneurs' business experience. Nazli, would you like to say something here?
Yes, I just wanted to add here very quickly, as Doğan mentioned, that there was a displeasure from the Turkish SME side towards Syrian SME side, as it would create some unfair trade, but unfair competition, more importantly, and prioritizing Syrian-led SMEs export potential will also decrease this displeasureness, so that they would be able to do more networking and they would be able to do more business together, because I think Turkish SMEs are also have the knowledge how the export potential is important. So I think this also would contribute to the other side. So I think it would kill two birds with one stone. And now I'm going back to be unmuted.
Thank you so much for your contribution. Well, yeah, I mean, also establishing an online database for Syrian SMEs to track business networking events is also crucial for that part. And since time is pretty much limited, I will keep moving forward very quickly. Conducting impact analysis also is needed, as seen in the previous example, as the problem definition. There is a kind of a lack of the foundation for constructing the up-to-date and most relevant activities upon that. So that's why conducting impact analysis is kind of a must for any programming activities in the development and humanitarian aid spheres. And what else I would add here? There's also the lack of coordinations amongst relevant stakeholders, as mentioned. And we do believe that having a kind of an active engagement plan with stakeholders before deciding on the strategic investment plan for relevant parties would be key in making a step ahead, again, in favor of those beneficiary groups. So as a result of that, in doing so, actually, having this meeting twice a year would be well enough to think about the issues at strategic level. And some advocacy and awareness raising activities to elevate the refugee stigmatization would be a key issue nowadays, again, due to the fact that still one of the biggest challenges we have been facing in Turkey is integration of Syrian refugees in Turkey, and the business to social cohesion activities would be one of the most amazing activity types amongst others. It's not just because of the fact that this is just a commercial activities. This is also one of the pure indicators of peaceful coexistence while doing businesses, which also results in some lucrative businesses and economic return for the host country. This is how it's approached by local community members. And maybe last but not least here, develop a finance program addressing refugee entrepreneurs. And creating a fund and a business grants whereby only Syrian-led SMEs operating in Turkey could apply. So as given that there's a kind of a disadvantage situation compared to the local community members, this could be solely designed for Syrian-led SMEs in order to benefit. So this is also kind of a contribution we want to share with a wider audience when it comes to enriching the quality of interventions that is being designed for refugee-led SMEs in Turkey. And I guess more or less, yep, I assume it's done. Thank you so much for listening to us here, and please feel free to Adam Wright, share with us your initial comments and contributions if available.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. So we'll move into the questions right now. So please remember to drop questions in the Q&A function or the chat. One thing that I'm interested in is that, so at CIPE, we're increasingly focused on ensuring that economic growth includes everyone, that it's inclusive growth. So keeping in mind that, all refugee entrepreneurs are in a challenging situation, but I wanted to ask if you observe different experiences for Syrian women-owned SMEs and those owned by men.
Nazli?
Yes, I will. So obviously, yes, there's a difference in the level of difficulties that have been faced by male entrepreneurs, male Syrian entrepreneurs, and women, like female Syrian entrepreneurs are different. But this is just not because they're Syrians. This is still just coming from the male-female division within the labor market. So I would say this is just the representation of the patriarchy. And also, like, for example, the Turkish women entrepreneurs, while they have been supported by their female counterparts, in the Syrian part, there's also a point that they haven't been supported by the Turkish female entrepreneurs. So we can say that while the patriarchy is the only, is the first biggest problem that have been faced by Turkish female entrepreneurs, in the Syrian female entrepreneurs part, there is first the Turkish entrepreneurs plus patriarchy plus being somewhere new, and also their culture, like the Syrian culture, also does not support them being in the labor market. So I think, yes, if we compare with Syrian male entrepreneurs or with Turkish female entrepreneurs, I would say Syrian female entrepreneurs are coming at the bottom of this pyramid, and they have been facing way more difficulties.
Sure, thank you for that. So I also wanted to ask if you could go into some more detail about how Syrian refugee-owned SMEs are driving economic growth in Turkey, particularly export growth. Maybe some more detail about the types of businesses that are driving the exports, kind of that sort of thing.
Maybe I can jump in here. I mean, refugee entrepreneurs have much higher rates of exporting, actually, which is around 48% than all registered companies in Turkey, 11% in total, actually. So while most of those Turkish companies are exporting and go to the Europe, refugee SMEs mostly export to the Middle East because of the language advantage. And this might be maybe interpreted as a reflection of continued ties with the Middle Eastern markets, and also reliance on some family ties. And maybe we would also say pre-migration social capital, such as some buildings partnership with other Syrians and reviving relations with old customer networks from Syria to develop transnational trade relations. So it's still going on, and it's still growing in Turkey. And even the city of Gaziantep has been a kind of a place for exporters, mostly again dominated by Syrian-led SMEs rather than the Turkish counterparts, which also says a lot in terms of the contribution of Syrian-led SMEs to inclusive economic growth of Turkey.
Sure, and just to follow up, what sector of the economy would you say are Syrian entrepreneurs participating in most frequently?
I will show it from me. I'm trying to share my screen again and show it to you. But we can say most of them are in the wholesale and retail trade, and then manufacturing comes. Dogan, can you continue while I'm trying to find the slide? Yeah.
Let me try to find out the slide here, just a second. Yeah, here you go. Yeah, wholesale retail vehicle repair, which is around 531. This is actually from the southeastern region of Turkey that depicts all those companies registered in the region, but it's more or less the same when it comes to the overall, I mean, the sectoral concentration in Turkey. And it follows up, and manufacturing also follows up the wholesale retail and vehicle repairs, which is also around 274. The situation is more or less depicted here. So,
Okay, yeah, very interesting. That's
And
great
also,
information.
I would
Sorry, go
like to
ahead.
add, I would like to add, like, because their culture is some sort of unique in Turkey. So when they, for example, the costume shops, like small gift shops, and also especially in the food and accommodation sector, like some Syrian food restaurants, they're also quite in the rise in Turkey, and they also really contribute to Turkey's inclusive, inclusive economic growth. I think that is also something that we should highlight, because their cultural representations also, again, it's like the continuation of the ties with their own backgrounds, with their own cultures, but at the end of the day, they managed to turn it into advantage.
Great. Do you have any, did any stories stand out to you about turning the challenges into advantages?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
Oh, sure. Did any stories stand out to you about turning those challenges into advantages?
Yeah, I think they are aware of it. For example, during one of the interviews that I have conducted with the Syrian SMEs, they were facilitated from these training and mentoring sessions. They are aware of the fact that now they're turning their disadvantage into advantage, because yes, the language was a big problem for that, but then this language allowed them to continue their export activities with the MENA region.
Okay, great. Yeah. So thinking about the role played by business associations, business networks, chambers of commerce, what role did they play in kind of tackling these challenges and helping to integrate and build capacity for the Syrian refugee entrepreneurs?
Maybe I can give an example from Gaziantep in Turkey. So it's a kind of a really good example. So Gaziantep Chamber of Commerce established a Syria desk under the chamber. And this chamber, actually the overarching aim of this desk was to provide some services, some better services for their own Syrian members. The Syrian members is actually totaling 12 Syrian members companies before 2011, and nowadays it exceeds 2,000 members. The main services that are being provided by Gaziantep Chamber of Commerce are mostly accumulated under 4 different categories. Actually, this Gaziantep Chamber of Commerce, the Syria desk, are generally understanding challenges faced by Syrian enterprises, and also working kind of as an information center for Syrian-led SMEs, and also keeping their information up to date in order to provide some tailor-made services for, again, SMEs who are not familiar with the ongoing changes happening in commercial law or incentives being provided by relevant ministries, and also establishing the Arabic website on the Gaziantep Chamber of Commerce website. So and also they try to organize some events, some fairs, some, let's say, B2B activities in order to bring all those business people together to think about to what extent it is possible to extend their own businesses in various regions, not just only in the Middle East, but at the same time in Europe and the rest of the world. So this is a kind of a good example in Turkey, and as far as we know, there's just only one desk established in Turkey serving for Syrian-led SMEs. Another example would be a project initiated by the business umbrella organization called Turkumfet in Turkey. They had a project on matchmaking businesses between Syrian-led SMEs and Turkish counterparts. So in addition to the financial support, they tried to come up with some mentoring, training, and matchmaking activities in order to increase their own internal capacities, in addition to putting them in contact with Turkish business ecosystem. These 2 examples would be most prominent ones amongst others.
Okay, great. So a question for Nazli. So I was hoping you could expand on the research methodology that you chose. Refugee entrepreneurship continues to be an area of interest for CIPE, and I'd be interested in hearing what aspects of this type of research project could be replicated to study and examine other cases.
So first of all, I think we managed to meet most of the key actors, especially the EU, EBRD, UN agencies, and on the other hand, the implementing organizations. I think we get their impressions very well, but of course, in each research project, there's always a space for expansion. I think we can involve in the future projects, we can involve more SMEs who have participated in these programs, because each experience is data, and each experience will guide us to somewhere. So even the design of the further, the future interventions, the ways in which these future interventions should be provided, I think SMEs' own lived experiences would affect them. But on the other hand, for example, I think there are more countries who are hosting high numbers of refugees, and I think they're trying to integrate them into their own labor markets. So I think this research should be conducted, should be replicated in those countries, and maybe some comparisons should be useful, as a research technique, comparative between 2 or 3 countries and lessons learned. We can create an environment where these countries can learn from each other's experiences.
Okay, great. So a question from the audience. Do you think that Turkish SMEs are interested in engaging with Syrian SMEs, or does misjudgment and criticism impact that type of integration and cooperation?
I think we cannot give one clear-cut answer to this question, but the perceptions and the attitudes are changing. For example, first of all, especially, before the change has started, there were 2 reasons behind this displeasure. The first one, Dogan mentioned that the Turkish SMEs, the Turkish business owners were really saying that this concentration on the Syrian entrepreneurs, this is just creating an unfair trade. But on the other hand, there was also cultural and ethnic stigmatization. So this stigmatization has begun to be decreased, and I think it will continue to be decreasing, and someday there won't be any stigmatization. And then these developments, these processes will change, I think, the perceptions and the attitudes.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to mention very quickly, always about doing businesses in case there is a kind of a lucrative businesses in place on the table. So that's why Turkish business environment tries to get familiar with the counterparts with Syrian-led SMEs, because in fact there was no any kind of an encounters between Syrian-led SMEs and Turkish SMEs. To be honest, 2 years ago, many very well-known business federations have no any willingness towards conducting such B2B events between Syrian-led SMEs and Turkish SMEs. Always about climate, always about environment, based on success stories that we have been seeing in the field on the ground. This is going to be a change. And someone in the chat box I'm seeing right now, Phyllis, has already shared some success story with us. So this could be one of those examples, actually. Based on the mutually beneficial environment, I would say everybody would easily agree on the fact that this could be lucrative for both parties.
Great. And then just a follow-up question. What sectors of the economy saw the most cooperation? And I guess what sector saw the least?
Could you repeat again your question?
Oh, yep. What sectors of the economy saw the most cooperation between Turkish SMEs and Syrian SMEs?
It's a good question. Mostly in the wholesale and manufacturing sectors are the key examples on collaboration. But I mean, I have to say, it's not that much easy to keep following up all those cooperation happening between the parties, relevant parties, representing the both communities, the business ecosystem, because I mean, still the problem is that there is kind of a limited interaction between Syrian-led SMEs and Turkish SMEs, and I mean, given that we have really such a huge, big organizations working with Turkish SMEs and Syrian SMEs, mutual understanding is pretty much limited, and we have some really small but highly promising examples that are changing the way of doing businesses in Turkey. So that's why it's not representative when it comes to sharing with you some of the key examples. But I would say, especially amongst those SMEs represented in the startups ecosystems, in the Turkish startup ecosystem is one of the key examples. To just give an examples, one of those SMEs was Wolves Interactive, and as a result of getting in touch with Turkish SMEs, they have received some initial investment from Turkish venture capital. So these models would be replicable at the end, in case we see again kind of a mutual understanding and having kind of a concrete long-term cooperation area.
Okay, great. Looks like we have time for just one or two more questions from the audience. So I'd like to ask, how have Syrian entrepreneurs adapted to the economic and market crisis over the last couple of years? Have they moved their firms online? Have they embraced digitization? And just again, what resources and trainings have been made available to them by chambers and associations?
I would also answer very quickly. I have actually two hats here that I wear. One is being a researcher, and also I'm also leading some of the development-focused interventions for Syrian-led SMEs. So currently, as Innovation for Development I40, we work on digitalization of Syrian-led SMEs in Turkey by putting them in contact with the biggest giant tech companies and e-commerce platforms. And I would confidently say that as a result of collaboration made with international actors, those SMEs are easily adapted into the e-commerce platforms, because this is the only way to coping with the ongoing economic crisis. Again, it's not just only for Syrian-led SMEs, but at the same time for Turkish SMEs, right? So, but at the end, given that this e-commerce platforms offer everything that we need, or we are in need of, so this is gonna be kind of a piece of cake for Syrian-led SMEs to make this competition with others through these online platforms. Just to give an example, we initiated an e-commerce platform integration for Syrian-led SMEs together with the biggest e-commerce platform in Turkey called Hepsi Burada. So at the end, we provide mentoring, we provide training, we provide some financial resources. Remember that we have mentioned in the report saying that in case there's a kind of a hybrid modality, having training, mentoring plus financial support, this kind of a guarantee for long-term successful present survival in the local business environment. As a result of this, we try to combine technical and non-technical services, or financial and non-financial services altogether through this e-commerce platform integration project. So at the end, they have started doing their own businesses without facing any troubles. So and they keep working without thinking too much on other external factors because of the making the integration easier through third party, in this case, through Hepsiburada.
And I think this was the area where the Turkish SMEs and the Syrian SMEs faced similar problems. For both of the two groups, it was really hard to convert to online e-trade, digital trading. But I think the implementing organizations did their interventions really timely. So I remember from especially the Wolves Interactive, the trainings, especially on how to build your online trade and just, all these tips about the online trading and online commerce. I think they really benefited very well, and they were really appreciating these trainings.
Great. And then what key lessons during this transformation over the last few years can we share with entrepreneurs elsewhere? What do you think might be generalizable? Like what takeaways do you think would be important for everyone to know?
Can we listen to your question again? Sorry, it's echoing here.
Sure. So considering the information we have from the last 2 years of economic crisis and recovery and digitization, what key lessons can we apply elsewhere to other entrepreneurs?
I think in this case, Hepsiburada's intervention was really good, which combines non-financial with financial, because it was, first of all, it was organizing the trainings and the mentorships, and then it was helping these SMEs to develop their own sites. And I think this was a good example, and I think this should be converted if the third party like Hepsiburada could be found in other cases as well.
I can also add something here, Adam. So as we see, language would be kind of a great catalyst in reaching out to other markets. Consider the fact that this Arabic-speaking population is a kind of population that is also pretty much beneficial for the local community members in Turkey while doing business in the rest of the world. This distinctive language would be kind of an advantage. It's also replicable to other countries. And another issue would be we haven't thought about making those harmonization activities with the support of business environment, business world. Nowadays, we have identified that the private sector could also play its own key role in bringing all those relevant stakeholders together for purposeful businesses, right? So that's why harmonization through business partnership would work very well in case there is a certain level of commitment to extend businesses. And maybe lastly, this is a kind of, again, the takeaway, which was replicable to other countries. My personal point of view would be that financing SMEs together with technical support would be key in successful project implementation. We cannot think about this apart from financial support. So this could be also considerable while thinking about implementing the same project and the rest of the world.
Okay, great. Well, that's about all we have time for today. So thank you again to Dogan and Nazli for their presentations and to the audience for their questions and attention. Please keep an eye out for more communications from the PPL team about our Research Unbound series, and remember to complete the event evaluation survey. The link will be in the chat. So thank you to everyone.
Thanks very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much.